Felt like we were on the Tonight Show. That was just kind of that transition. Good morning, everybody. Happy Father's Day to all the dads who are here and soon to be dads one day. First grader was once asked, "What is Father's Day?" And his response was, "It's a lot like Mother's Day, but you don't buy chocolate, you don't buy flowers. Basically, you don't spend a lot of money." So I want to thank Christ Family Church and Pastor Paul and Delia just for your love and support of Boys and Girls Country right here in Houston. We're so grateful for this church's not just financial support, but your prayers and just loving on our students as they come and worship here. And some of them are here this morning. So we thank you for your love and support. You know, it's been a busy spring at Boys and Girls Country. I was sharing with Juliet that this May, personally and as far as ministry work-wise, been one of the busiest months of my life. You know, last month in taking care of the children that we serve, we served 6,000 meals last month. That's a lot of cooking. During the summer, it gets up to closer to 9,000 meals. It's a month. It's really a busy time. And we had 13 seniors graduate from high school. Thank you so much for acknowledging them in the way that you did. Yeah. 13 seniors. And 3 of them are going to go on to play college football. I think a couple of them are here. I thought I saw Leo, Andrew. They're going to be going to play college football in the fall. They're already doing workouts and things like that. No one's invited me to work out with them, even though I need to. Pastor Paul, thank you, because every senior that graduated, he wrote a personal note to them and was able to give a nice offering on behalf of the church. So we thank you for that personal touch and that personal letter to our children. Now, Malcolm and Darla get to take care of them. Malcolm oversees our college and career program, and so Malcolm and Darla, you've had a busy May. Thank you for your service and ministry. They're hopping over there. In fact, we started coming to church here because Malcolm and Darla, they invited us, and he told us, "Hey, this is who we are. This is what our church looks like." And I thought, that sounds a lot what we're looking for. We had some real specifics about the church we wanted to attend. Crazy things like maybe they have a pastor that looks like Blake Shelton or something like that. So thank you, Malcolm and Darla, for allowing us to be a part of the ministry with you at Boys and Girls Country and here also at Christ Family Church. I want to say this before we get started. I hope that no one judges my parenting or fatherhood because I'm in a real vulnerable position here as we're going to be talking about confident parenting, because I want to say this: my parent reality is no different than yours. Think about that for a moment. In other words, my wife, she's right alongside me in the work that we do. She has a master's in marriage and family counseling. We don't have it all figured out. We don't. In fact, had a very embarrassing moment last fall where for some reason after service, my children in the foyer, you may have seen this, they think it becomes a UFC match out there. I mean, it is all out, headlocks, drop kicks. It's crazy. And so, I don't know, back in October, so I remember looking over there and I'm looking at this scene as Delia, she may have forgot about this moment, but she was corralling and trying to protect the little one from the big guy. And I thought, oh my God, those are my kids. And she's over there. I mean, good protection mode, good form, kicking the other guy away, and I thought, wow. And I'm going to have to write about this one of these days because I did exactly what a textbook parent should do. I ignored the situation. I not pretending like it wasn't even happening. I looked the other direction. I may have went to the restroom, said, hey, what's going on, brother? How you doing? And, pretending like I'm not seeing that scene over there, Reminds me of the comedian back in the 80s, Martin Mull, who said, having a family is like having a bowling alley installed in your brain. Today we're going to be looking at two popular verses that we find in Proverbs as it relates to parenting. And my goal today, this morning, is to shed some perspective on these passages of Scripture. Not necessarily new revelation, but some fresh perspective on two very important verses that have been taught to us over the years. Our series is still in Confident Living. Today I'm going to speak about confident parenting and the fatherhood impact on parenting as well, as we recognize our fathers today. I want you to think about this. If you could describe parenting in one word, what would that word be? Love. That's usually the first one you hear. I've asked that question in seminars and workshops that I've done on fatherhood and parenting. And I say, how would you describe it in one word? And you hear the word love. You hear the word overtime. You hear the word patience. And I asked this one time in a church service, and someone in the very back said, parenting is hard. He just yelled it out. It's hard. Yes, it is hard work. I actually heard a parent one time say, parenting is cooking. That's what parenting is. She says, I spend so much time in the kitchen, I feel that's what my parenting is all about. Yesterday, we were at a T-ball all-star tournament. My word, there should be a reality show on stuff like that, because that's parenting on a different level. But no one really uses this word here, and I believe that this is one word that describes what parenting is. Parenting is discipleship. I believe this is the one word that describes parenting more than any other word, discipleship. As parents, we are teachers. So the first point we're making this morning is that confident parenting is a discipleship journey. Proverbs chapter 22, verse 15, folly is bound up in the heart of a child, but the rod of discipline will drive it far from him. Very familiar passage. Folly bound up in the heart of a child, but the rod of discipline will drive it far from him. The question is, what are we trying to discipline? That's an important question. Contrary to popular belief, this verse is not speaking about behavior modification. Listen to this. The verse says to discipline the folly, the foolishness of a child's heart. In other words, our goal as parents, as fathers, is to help our children grow, mature, and be responsible. This is the essence of discipleship, growth and maturity. Now, please note the word discipline comes from the word disciple. A disciple is one who is in training as a student. This person is learning and growing spiritually, and Jesus, the master teacher, taught his disciples with love, grace, and with mercy. So to discipline my child means to teach my child to be a responsible young person, to embrace the values we have as a family. Does my child understand the value of hard work? What about other values of integrity, honesty, purity in relationships and in friendships as well? I want to make this very clear before we dive into this a little bit more. I'm not part of the anti-spanking movement, okay? But I'm also not part of the movement that promotes punishment, fear, and intimidation, because I don't find that in Scripture. Okay. Consider the work that I do. Many of you know work that I do at working at Boys and Girls Country. I've seen the other side of parenting where parents took things too far. And in some cases, I've even seen the dark side. Started as a youth pastor about 25 years ago, and it's been such an honor and a joy to work with families, and I praise God for the many victories and testimonials I've seen come out of families, especially if they were coming from a hard place. But in that process, there have been some very dark stories as well. You know, when we talk about the rod, the only time we see the rod in a corrective action form in the Old Testament was when a master was beating his slave. That's really the only time. But what does it look like if parents took a discipleship approach to their parenting instead of a punishment model? What does a teaching model look like? What does a discipleship model look like instead of a punishment model? So several years ago, I was working with military fathers. My lovely bride, Ashley, facilitated that for me. She volunteered me to do that work. How many of you guys been volunteered or voluntold a few times? She was actually working on the Army base and doing a lot of parent education classes and parent enrichment classes, and they wanted some work to be done with the fathers. So I came in and started doing some work with our nation's military there, Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio, Texas. And I asked this question, what does it look like if you are parenting from a discipleship model? And I use that exact word, instead of a punishment model. And one of the master sergeants in there said, sir, can I give you an example that I think relates? Love the military. They always tell you, sir. I said, yes, sir, you can. And he said a couple years ago, I was in my son's room. I'm going back with this story. So he talks about how he's in his son's room and he heard the music coming from his shuffle. And he picked up and listened to what the song was. And he said, as I was listening to this music, I heard some of the most vulgar, inappropriate things being said about women. And I was a little upset that my son was listening to this music. He goes on to say, he said, I was about to take it to my child. Those were his exact words. I was about to take it to my son. Didn't know exactly what he meant by that, but my imagination went there. He said, but then I decided I really want to teach my son something. I just don't want to get mad at him. I want to teach him something. So this dad was pretty savvy, goes to the internet, finds the name of the song, and finds the words, prints out the words of the song. So this was a family. They had 2 teenagers. This family was on the go all the time. And they would have like family meetings 2 or 3 times a month. So later that day, he told his son, he said, hey, we're having a family meeting tomorrow, at this particular time. And his teenage son said, yes, sir, Dad, I'll be there. He said, yeah, about the meeting tomorrow. Handed him a piece of paper. He says, I want you to come to our meeting, and I'm going to give you a moment to read the words that are on this piece of paper. Son looked at it, looked at his dad. I could just see his eyes getting yay big. What the, it was. And he said, but Dad, son, it's okay. You have my permission to read those words in our family meeting tomorrow in the presence of your mother and your sister. Speechless. And he said, Dad, I don't think I can do that. Well, why not? Dad, because these words are inappropriate. And I cannot say these things in front of Mom and in front of my sister. And his dad looked at him and said, do you understand what I'm trying to teach you, son? Yes, sir, I do. That's a discipleship model. That's a teaching model. When I was a youth minister back in the mid-90s, early 90s, 25 plus years ago, parents would take a situation like this, many good Christian parents trying to do the right thing, and they would go and remove the stereo system. Let's get rid of the boom box. They're like, we're taking control, Pastor Vince, over this situation. We even took down the door. We removed the hinges from the door, took down the door. We took down all the posters. And even at the time, being, 24, 25 years old, I'm thinking, what is that going to accomplish? tell you what they were trying to do. They were trying to get some type of control over the situation. Somehow, some way, taking off the door, removing the TV, and the internet was still in its infancy back then. Somehow, some way, they were trying to take control. This father and the example I gave you with his son, that's taking control of the situation. Confident parenting is a discipleship journey. When we do more teaching, less punishment, we will see greater results. I guarantee it. Secondly, confident parenting affirms the strengths of children. Proverbs chapter 22, verse 6, another very familiar passage. Train a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not turn from it. As fathers and teachers, we affirm the strengths of our children. Today's social worker and counselor is trained to work from what we call a strength-based model. In other words, every child has strengths to build upon. Some of these strengths and abilities are yet to be developed or yet to be nurtured and cultivated. And we're going to share a quote with you by Chuck Swindoll, one of my favorite writers. He's a renowned scholar and educator, and he gives this commentary on this passage. He says, we're to train a child according to his or her characteristic manner. Some will be artistic, others athletic, and still others academic. One may be strong-willed and another compliant. Swindoll continues, the parent finds ways to encourage behavior that makes everyone happy and satisfies the child's deepest needs. And it involves guiding a wild spirit at times, in other words, in order to give it purpose and direction. Chuck Swindoll also goes on to talk about a tree and its natural bent. And he goes on to say that children have a natural bent in a certain direction, especially when you consider the branches. They're designed to grow in a certain direction. They have a natural bent. And as I was reading this, I thought about our home in San Antonio where we had this large magnolia tree in front of the house. And many of the homes in that area had oak trees. But we had this big magnolia tree that grew so big, pretty much covered up the entire front of the house. And I thought, man, we really need to get this thing trimmed. So in the community we lived in, an arborist had to come out and do the trimming and the cutting or whatever you wanted. So we had an arborist come out, and I said, sir, we really need this magnolia trimmed up. It's hanging really low. It can get real messy. It's hard to keep up and maintain. And I said, you see that oak tree down the road? I'd like to see if you could trim it up that way. And I'm sorry, but I had ignorance about trees at the time, especially magnolia trees. Well, I know everything you need to know about magnolia trees. I mean, how they got down to the South, and Thomas Jefferson was a big magnolia tree guy, and people wanted to look, wanted things to look like up in D.C., and so they started bringing trees down here. And anyway, so he's looking at the magnolia. He says, you want this tree to look like that tree down there. I said, yes, sir, if you could trim it up that way. And he just looked at me, and he knew I had no idea what I was talking about. So he goes up to the tree, and he put his hand on the tree and closed his eyes. And I said, oh my goodness, this is a bona fide tree hugger right here. He is serious about trees. He just put his hand, and he came up to me. He said, sir, I understand what you want. I get it. This tree hangs low. It spreads out the way it does. He said, but I cannot trim this tree like the oak tree over there. He said, if I do that, I'm going to be hurting this tree, and I don't want to do that. This tree is not designed to be trimmed up the way you want it. In fact, these magnolia trees are designed to hang low. They're designed to be this way. So if I start cutting and chopping it all up, it's going to hurt the tree, and I don't want to do that. And I thought, you win. You're the arborist. I'm the person who doesn't know anything about trees. But I emphasize this point today because there are a lot of stressed out parents trying to fit their children into a square when God has created them to be a triangle. The question is not just for the parents, but for every adult here. Think about the misery some of us went through because our parents were trying to push us in areas that we didn't want to go to. Think about the acting classes maybe you were a part of, maybe a sport that you really didn't want to do, volleyball, baseball. Think about areas you were pushed into and you were outright miserable trying to do those things. Some of us were being bent in the wrong direction. And by being bent in the wrong direction, you can hurt the child. You know, one of my favorite movies, if you're looking for a Father's Day movie, Billy Elliot. One of my favorite movies. Billy Elliot, his dad is trying to get him to do boxing. He's trying to get him into track, other sports, and other activities. Billy Elliot wants to be a ballet dancer. Wow. Dad's like, no way, not having it. Seen you run around in tights? No way. But I don't want to give the movie away, but you really see this beautiful character development happen and this relationship between a father and a son that goes to another level. Half our parenting issues will probably go away if we cultivate our children to build on their strengths and to dedicate them in the way that they are bent. Now, I'm not saying you let your children do whatever they want. Not saying that at all. But Scripture teaches us to help them build on their strengths. You know, it takes a lot of wisdom to provide this kind of training and this kind of guidance. Third point I want to emphasize this morning is that confident parenting must be intentional. Confident parenting must be intentional. If we're going to be successful parents, we must be intentional about our activities, our actions, and our behaviors. Good parenting does not just happen. Confident parenting is a practice and a process. I'm going to say that again. Confident parenting is a practice and a process. I still have not met parents who have figured it all out. But in my years of working with families, I've met many parents who thought they had it all figured out. I'm thinking, well, why are you in my office right now? You know, never said that, never said it, I was just thinking it. But many of them thought they had it all figured out. I love it when they show up and they tell me what they're going to do. And I'm like, listening, okay, yeah, that's a thought. When I was young in my career, one of my therapists I was working with taught me that. So if someone tells you something real radical, just that's a thought. It helps working with teenagers. Sorry, because I think a few of them heard me say this. I hate this place, Mr. Vince. I'm going to run away. Well, that's a thought, you know. One of them pulled that on me one time. They said, I'm going to run away. No, don't do that. Tell me where you want to go. I'll drive you. No, don't worry. See, Pastor Paul, if me and Ashley ever do a parenting workshop here, we will teach you some Jedi mind tricks. Bona fide Jedi mind tricks on these kids. It's amazing because it works. So let's look at Ephesians chapter 6, verse 4. It reads like this. If you do not shut your mouth, I'm going to give you something to cry about. Ouch. I know it doesn't say that. Okay. It really says this right here. I brought you into this world and I can take you out. That's what Ephesians chapter 6 verse 4 says. Think about that for a moment. I actually thought about that over the weekend, you know, as I was meditating on this message. What a thing to say to a child. Maybe jokingly, ha 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 for the moment, but in an intense moment, what are we trying to communicate at that moment? Ownership? Property? Yeah, to a certain extent. During Roman times, we can give a whole discourse, a historical perspective on the father's right during Roman times, where he actually had the authority to kill his child. Yeah, it was that brutal. Yeah, there was no CPS number back then. No child protective services around. But that's an idea of ownership and property. But as you think on it on a spiritual level, if you're speaking to a child that way, you're like, this is God's creation that he's entrusted you to love, nurture, and disciple, and yet we would speak to them in that way. We would speak that way to a holy, sanctified creation of God. We would act like we have the authority to speak in that tone, in that manner, and in that kind of motivation. Shame on us. Shame on us as parents, as adults. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and the instruction of the Lord. You know, what are the guiding principles of the Lord's discipline and instruction? When I look at the subject headings of the teaching of Christ, I see mercy. I see forgiveness. I see love. I see truth. I see the Sermon on the Mount, which pretty much summarizes the teachings of Christ in Christianity. You know, when my kids see me as a father, when they see me as a parent, do they see a reflection of the discipline and the instruction of Christ? Do they see that? Do they see in me? Do they see truth? Do they see love? Do they see mercy? If not, maybe it's time to become more intentional about my parenting. I leave you with this quote here. Every father should remember that one day his son will follow his example instead of his advice. You know, we did baseball this spring and got to become good friends with the Holsleys and Mike and Krista playing baseball together. And there's some very entertaining moments that happen in Little League baseball. Like I said, I need to talk to somebody about getting a reality show going. Just the antics are amazing. But there was an incident there during a game where a father really got into the grill of his son and was yelling at him, cursing at him, saying some things that were highly inappropriate. I wasn't there to see it, but Connor told me about it, my son, my 8-year-old. And so I used it as a teaching moment, and I said, Connor, what'd you learn from that? And he was really bothered by this incident, really bothered by it. He said, Dad, it made me really sad. Made me sad to see that somebody my age, his dad was talking to him in that way. And he looked at me and he said, Dad, I know you'll never speak to me that way. And I said, you know what, Connor? You're right. I won't talk to you that way. Every father should remember that one day his son will follow his example instead of his advice. Intentional parenting is a practice and a process. But as we go through the process, we become more confident and become a better version of a parent. Like I said, my reality is very similar to yours. I have those days. We all know what those days look like. But every day I strive to be a better version of who I am right now. And so this is where we really need help from our wives and the women in our life. We need your help as men, as fathers, as you give us more opportunities, especially if we have a growing family like I do. And what I mean by that is sometimes moms, in their nature, they're going to take over and pretty much do a chunk of the work because we're not going to do it as good as you. Let's just say it. We're not going to do it as good as you, but we need those opportunities to try. If not, it's going to be very hard to have a weekend getaway with your girlfriends, with your mom, your sister. You've got to trust us to let us work on that practice and the process. I'm thinking of a time when Ashley was out of town. It was a few years back. Boys were small, and I said to myself, I got this. We're going to have a great long weekend. Lord, help me, you know. So she calls, I think it's like a Thursday night, you know, she's already with her friends and they're doing their thing, you know, her sorority sisters from college, and they're having a good time, and she calls, and it's that different tone in her voice. Well, how's everything going? I can just see her smiling, you know, everything's great, had a great day. I was stressing out the whole time. I said, great day. Kids are already sound asleep, everything taken care of. Well, good. Did they eat everything I prepared for them? Yeah. Didn't quite do that. We went to Chick-fil-A. Vince, what are you doing going to Chick-fil-A? You know, I had everything in these little, you know, plastic compartments. All you had to do was just serve them, you know, the food, the fruit. Everything's balanced out. No, we went for the greasy stuff. Yeah. Well, how did the rest of the evening go? Went really good. Really, everything's good. So both the boys got a bath in? Yeah, about that. No, we didn't. No baths happened tonight. Well, how come? Well, it was getting kind of late. Well, what time did they go to bed? It was actually closer to 10. I said 9-ish. I lied. I know. Just the lying preacher up here. But yeah, I said 9-ish. It was, like I said, closer to 10. So anyway, it kind of went over everything I didn't do right. And I said, hey, look, it's all good. Have a great weekend. And my point is, and I'm embellishing that a little bit, but we need more opportunities. Dad, we need more opportunities. Let me help you with a very simple exercise. And I used to do this when I think it was maybe 2 or 3 years working with the military fathers, is I would do a no media weekend, a 24-hour media fast. It is something that is so wonderful once you're in the exercise. It traumatizes and terrifies people, especially in this day and age where you always need something, some type of internet service, iPhone. But if you can put that down, only use the phone for emergency purposes, 24 hours. You can do it from Friday night, 6 o'clock, all the way to Saturday, 6 o'clock, or Saturday, Sunday, but a 24-hour media fast, no TV, no computer stuff, Game Boys, iPads. I can't even say all the crazy things that are out there. I bought the Nintendo Switch the other day. I had to take out a loan for that. I mean, there's all this stuff we have access to. I remember doing this several years ago with these fathers. And then when they would come back, it was a 4-week curriculum. They'd come back and I'd say, tell me about your exercise. We would hear some of the most amazing stories coming from these dads. And wow. I didn't realize how much my kids enjoy camping out in the backyard. They were doing cheap stuff, easy stuff. Isn't that amazing? We're always looking for affordable stuff to do. Yeah, turn some stuff off and you will start interacting with each other and realize that board games are fun again. Right? But think about that exercise. We're under construction as parents. And as men, we're under construction as well. I think about that sign, Men at Work. You know, when you're driving around, you see all this construction going on, Men at Work, and you probably think about the rock and roll band as well. But I want to take a moment just to speak to the fathers, if I can continue in that vein for a few moments. If there's ever a time where we need the provision and the protection of fathers, it is right now. More so than ever is right now. There is a worldwide assault on manhood and fatherhood. And I'm praying against it. And I'm trying to encourage and love every brother I can into being a bigger and better man of God. And I'm praying for more mentors to rise up. I've been so blessed in my life to have some great mentors step into my life and help me become a better man, better version of who I am. 20 years ago, Time magazine wrote an article called The Prodigal Father. And the big question was this right here: where have all the fathers gone? You know, I'm in church asking this question. This is a national magazine asking, where have all the fathers gone? Some dads have left spiritually, some have left emotionally, some may be physically there, but they cannot be depended upon. 25 years ago, David Blankenhorn wrote the book, Fatherless America. And he said in that book, he said, if we don't address this issue of the lack of fathers, we're going to be facing one of the greatest social ills in our nation. And that's become the case. When you look at folks in prison, when you look at a lot of dysfunction that is happening in our world, so much of it can be attributed to the lack of fathers in the lives of children. I like to tell kids all the time, some of the young men I work with at Boys and Girls Country, I tell them, what have you learned through all this? And they said, I've learned that I'm not going to be the parent that the parent was to me. I'm going to be different. I'm going to be a different man. I'm going to be a different father. Put our last slide up there. Dr. Sigmund Freud said this early in his career. We call him the father of psychology. He said, I cannot think of any need in childhood as strong as the need of a father's protection. I know Freud really, we consider the father of psychology. I realize that I studied him at the Christian college I went to. May have been off on some things, but he was dead on in talking about the personality. And we build so many frameworks from his research. I'm going to bring things to a close, and Pastor Paul's going to make his way up here. David Blankenhorn, in his book, Fatherless America, he also said this right here. He said that today's man is not perfect. Like I said, we're a work under construction. We don't have it all figured out. In a few minutes, I'll be outside trying to break up my kids, and I'll be yelling for Pastor Delia to come over and help me a little. He said, today's man, today's father is not perfect, but he's good enough to be irreplaceable. Whew, that's good. And I would say that to every dad here, every man, you are good enough to be irreplaceable. What's the one thing you can do as a father? What's the one thing you can do that's going to leave a lasting impact on your children? It's this right here. You show their mom how much you love her. Show their mom just how much you love her. You do that, look out. That's a good place to start. I have to finish with this crazy thought. I'm going back to one of the ultimate guy movies, Jerry Maguire. Show me the money. Remember that movie? Yeah. Jerry Maguire. His mentor is Dickie Fox. And throughout the movie, he references sayings or things that Dickie Fox, the sports agent mentor he had, who helped guide him. And this is one of my favorite lines. Dickie Fox says, I don't have it all figured out. He's an older gentleman in the movies. I don't have it all figured out. In fact, I have failed more than I've succeeded. But I love my life. I love my wife. And I wish you my kind of success. I know that's not scriptural. But love your life. Love your wife. Be the man God's called you to be.